This is something with some real weight to it that might change you forever.
And so when I started reading these things, that's when I was like, oh, this is way bigger than me.
It mixed genres in a way that I hadn't seen before.
It was cathartic for a lot of people, from like a real fan perspective.
It's a challenge to remake an undeniably iconic game. But how do they find a new story worth telling within that classic? Today, we'll dive into the world of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in this episode of Next on GamesRadar. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of the most hotly anticipated games in years, recently winning the Game Awards' Most Anticipated Game and the Golden Joystick Award for Most Wanted Game. The immortal story of Cloud's fated battle against Sephiroth has been compelling players since the first release in 1997. We're going to spotlight the impact of Final Fantasy VII and show why Rebirth is the perfect place to jump in, whether you're a PS1 OG or a recent convert.
It mixed genres in a way that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't pure high fantasy. It had elements of steampunky designs and pseudo sci-fi futuristic and elements of magic. I don't know, it had a coolness to it as well.
Tell me about your experience with Final Fantasy VII.
First RPG I ever played. Didn't like RPGs as a kid. You know, I grew up on Atari, quick stuff, right? And it was a great experience because of all the relationships. They were all in that together, and they grew, right? And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's one of those things where you just go, wow, this is a story. And that's why I think it's so exciting and so relevant for today.
When Final Fantasy VII debuted, the gaming standards were raised. Whether you were a fan of JRPGs or not, you couldn't deny its significance. And contrary to what you may think, you don't need to play any other Final Fantasies to get what's going on, since each game is a standalone story.
There is a moment where I think an entire generation of gamers felt a collective loss. And we all went through that together. And I think it's a bonding thing. This is a story that has some real meat to it and character arcs that are going to leave you with a lasting impression, right? This is something with some real weight to it that might change you forever.
It's this boldness to innovate that fuels the journey gamers are about to embark on with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Everything is updated, from the cutting-edge PS5 graphics to the action-oriented combat. However, one thing has remained the same: the clash between our hero Cloud and the one-winged angel Sephiroth.
Dude, one of the coolest characters in the world. So he's like a mixture between what I would see the Three Musketeers being like, the D'Artagnan coming out, good-looking cat that can kill you with a sword, but doesn't have to. He's one of those guys who's always in the back of your mind. Well, what about the guy with the white hair and the wing? That's a villain. That's a true villain.
I love all sides of Sephiroth. I think that the more you delve into his motivations, the cooler that guy is. I love the fact that it was one of the earliest villains in gaming history to have more to him. He's not just, I want to take over the world just for the lol. Little young me was terrified of all that stuff, and I think that's one of the reasons that it stuck with me.
Part of it's his design. Out of the gate, he just, especially for a mid-90s era, which was, he was the perfect, edgelord adjacent sort of character design, long black leather trench coat, long silver hair, long blade. I think it was the mystery and the mystique they laid into him too. You don't meet him till much later. You hear about him before he ever arrives.
Even with years of history to call on, Square Enix has taken great pains to make sure Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a fresh start for every gamer, even if they didn't play 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake.
So the impact, I didn't know because it was COVID. I started reading these DMs and these folks were saying, hey man, thank you so much for doing this. We thought this, and it was this. Thank you so much for doing this. I was just waiting for this game, and this game came out and it changed my whole mindset. Thank you so much for writing this. Me and my brother grew up playing this and you just brought it. And I'm going, what? And because it was COVID, people were at home and they were playing it and they had time to do it. And so when I started reading these things, that's when I was like, oh, this is way bigger than me. This is bigger than the game. This is bigger than the company. This is big. This is how it's supposed to be.
A lot of people don't know this side of my story, but I had a good chunk of time, man, when I was working on this game that I wasn't really the best here. Yeah, to have the game come out and to have the world kind of be in the state that it was cathartic for a lot of people. From a real fan perspective.
I think for me, I expect and hope that people can come into this one fresh. From what I can tell, the game opens up currently with what we saw in the demo, the Nibelheim flashback, which is a wonderful way to bring newcomers in. You get to learn about the history and dynamic of Cloud and Sephiroth. You get to kind of feel for the dynamic between the party as they're listening in on this conversation. And it's a good introductory point. I'm curious to see how that plays out for the rest of the beginning of the game for newcomers.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, exclusive to the PlayStation 5, is likely to be a flagship title for a whole new generation of gamers, just like the original one was for PlayStation 1. All in all, Square Enix wants to leave your jaw on the floor with a fresh new story and fresh new gameplay. Speaking of jaws on the floor, next time we'll show you how the world, combat, and characters of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth have evolved and expanded to set a new standard in RPGs. That's it for this episode of Next on GamesRadar.